We're live.
Live from the Plutopia News Network. We ask you, please join with us for a moment of silent flatulence in behalf of our friend Rudy, who has had a bad week. Poor Rudy. I think that's enough. Oh, and one of the not ready for cable news players has joined us. Hello, Maggie Duvall.
Hi, sorry, last minute I was deep in some work and I was like, oh, crap.
Well, we're all guilty of that. I've spent the day wrestling with my SQL database setups, and that is always just such a joy. I would love to do that every day, but
Isn't it? I hear you. I feel your pain.
Yes. Pains kind of lower down in my body.
And Susie's here. So
there we are. Hey, the gang's all here.
I do have a slight bit of unfortunate news. The streaming to that particular link did not work.
Oh.
But I am posting the link on
oh, really? Even though it says live on YouTube and everything?
We're live.
Yeah, I thought it was going to work and it didn't.
So we are not live on YouTube.
Shoot. We're live on YouTube. This is correct.
Okay. Well, hey, all you folks on Facebook, you just have to talk to Mr. Zuck and tell him to get it together. We're going to blame him. Everybody else does. I mean, why not? Hey, Susie, you're muted. Polluted? Muted?
Muted.
Up.
Now she's frozen.
Oh, we've got the slow motion, Susie. There you are.
What I'm trying to do actually is make my cute little whatever this thing is. It doesn't matter. Not have a wide lens. It's right now it's on a wide lens and I really don't know why. So anyway, it doesn't matter. How are y'all doing?
We're doing fine. We just had a moment of silent flatulence for Rudy, and he had a bad week.
I would say.
Sorry. Well, yeah, that was too much for him.
Yeah, the usual suspects on cable news are charging to his rescue.
Of course.
And he didn't mean it. He was just kidding around. That never worked for anyone.
Not a joke.
Well, what are we going to do? Oh, you got a joke? Do it.
No, I said it's not a joke.
Oh, joke.
It sounded like you said, I've got a joke.
Yes, and it's Rudy. Okay. I just love picking on the guy.
Rude Rudy.
He's very pickable.
Do you think he'll go down the way Cohen did? I mean, and can you imagine being the mayor of New York during 9/11 and now this? I mean, what a fall.
I saw Cohen. Cohen thinks he'll go down the way Cohen did.
Oh, yeah. The interview with Cohen was interesting. He's like, basically, he's going to roll.
Yeah.
And judging by his lack of fortitude in recent years, I would see him just rolling like a bad volleyball.
Yeah.
Yeah. What
was it that Stephen Colbert said something about having his next business venture between a crematorium and a dildo hut?
Well, that was one of the highest low points of Rudy's media mastery. I mean, how many people can screw up as badly as that? I mean, I've done a lot of public events and I've done my share of screw ups, but that goes onto the top 10 list easily.
I've been wondering too about, I haven't been, I sort of dive in and out of attention about Texas these days since I'm not there anymore. But is it just me, or is Ted Cruz trying to be like macho all the time? Like it seems like he's doing this kind of macho trip thing of like showing himself in the jungle or the border or wearing a cowboy hat or what. Like,
he has the man beard.
What the hell is going on with this guy?
You remember when Rick Perry got his smart glasses? This is Ted Cruz's man beard.
Okay. Yeah.
Exactly.
There was a great bit of graffiti in San Antonio where they superimposed Senator Ted's face onto a really, really rotund guy. It looks like he may have been a really overweight Mexican wrestler, you know, all the tattoos and the big arms. And that was a big tourist attraction in San Antonio for a while.
Yeah, but then he opens his mouth.
What are they called? They're called Libra.
Oh, Luchadora.
A luchadoro.
Luchador.
Yeah.
Well,
that's hilarious. Yeah, I don't think so.
Yeah, maybe Ted can get that as a next career. You know, he can get the funny mask and they throw him into the ring.
But when he opens his mouth and speaks, everything is negated. Like there's no like. Where did he get that voice? Anyway,
I know he has a real nasally voice like that.
Yeah, that intimidates me.
Have you seen him do his podcast type thing?
No.
He has this square of carpet and an easy chair, and sometimes he has a guest and another easy chair, and there's like probably 3 cameras on him, and they shoot him from all these different angles as he pontificates. It's brilliant.
Let's get him on here.
Yeah.
Let's interview him.
No, that's not.
I can't do it. I'm busy.
I would probably go to prison for what I would say. So my attorney would make me stay off.
Now, you know, we really are supposed to be a highly objective news organization.
I thought it was highly objectionable.
I'm getting a hint of.
I feel like we just objectified Ted.
No,
I'm pretty sure that was objectification.
We're even-handed here. Well, this one is a little more even than the other one.
I have one leg that's longer than the other one. Just so you know.
I would laugh, but like what?
Thank you. That was. Is that a non sequitur or just kind of throwing something out there?
I don't have any sequiturs left.
He's sequitur free.
I don't give a sequitur.
Well, we're certainly loosening things up here, and I thought we were going to be really serious.
Yeah. So do y'all survive the? Do y'all survive the weather front last night? It's another thing I watch from afar is when the fronts come through with the hail and the tornadoes and stuff.
Hail, yes. It was stuff. It was flashy. We got it out here in beautiful Bastrop County. It got really funky, so I didn't get a lot of sleep. I'd get to sleep just a little bit, and then there'd be a big rolling thunder review coming through.
Wow.
The thunder was a little more distant here, but the rain was very persistent.
Yeah, poor San Marcos got hammered. Yeah. They got golf ball sized hail.
Crazy.
Yeah. I saw some I shared a post of I guess west of San Antonio, there were chunks of ice falling from the sky. It wasn't like hail, it was
dear God.
Sharp chunks of ice, like big, like grapefruit size. Like, okay.
I wonder if we got any hail. Maybe we have hail damage.
God is mad at them.
Yeah.
Hey, I think that storm was somewhat focused on Greg Abbott last night too.
I hope it was.
Poor Greg.
So here's a Austin political thing to talk about. The other thing I was disturbed to read about is the horrifically low turnout of Democratic voters in the election with Prop B. Like, are we going back to the whole thing again of like, we'll let the Republicans like win all these local races. That's how they got in the power in the first place. Like, we'll turn out for one election, but screw everything else. Like, what the heck's going on?
Is the election already done?
It's Saturday. Saturday is election day. So early voting is what you're seeing. But of course, Democrats are the highest turnout for early voting. So Maggie, I agree with you. And I've been afraid of this for quite some time. And I think it's got to do with fatigue. Quite honestly, we're all exhausted, and now we think we've crossed, much like the 80s, I feel. We feel like we've crossed a finish line, and now we can all just take a break.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we saw that after Obama was elected, everyone just sort of took a middle vacation. And, well, we're okay now. He's in charge. And we ended up with the Republican-controlled legislative branch, which just helped a whole lot.
Yeah, because I've been apparently people in Westlake aren't fatigued because they're turning out in record numbers from what I read.
Well, they don't want to have
Republican voters. It's like they're like, okay, here we go, we're going to take it back.
Yeah, that whole uproar about the people who had a free ride on paying Austin taxes for all their multi-million-dollar mansions out there. They got motivated.
So are we sure that? So I know there's voter turnout as a whole is low, but are we sure that the Democrats aren't showing up? I can't find anything that says what the mix is.
I just know. I'm just basing it on history that I've seen. For the higher early turnout are usually Democrats. That's just what I've seen. I don't know about this time.
I've just been following friends who are involved in Austin politics and elections, just saying it's disappointing how few are showing out for early. It seems predominantly, Republican voters are showing up for the early voting and not as many. I mean, people are waiting. They're, the good souls are standing in line and waiting an hour and a half if they have to or whatever to vote. But
what line?
There's
no line in any place I went.
Well, my friend Valerie was posting, it looked like she was at something like the Shriners place over in, and there was like around the building kind of thing. So like some people that were trying to get there in time. So anyway, again, hearsay, but
that's great though.
But what I am hearing is that, it's not really impressive how many are showing up.
I wonder where you can go to vote. Randall's used to be a location, and I know there's no voting happening there right now.
I checked. There are like 6 places, I think, here in Austin where you can do early voting.
That's probably one of the reasons there's no voting.
Yep.
Yeah. Is that way down from previous off-year elections?
Oh my God. Well, yeah, I used to be able to, there were places all over where you could vote.
Yeah. HEB.
All over. HEB constantly had voting, and they would even set up a trailer. It was, so yeah, I think that they have fewer polling places, and I went in and there were more people working there than were voting. We walked right in.
Wow.
So it was really disheartening.
When did you go?
I went on Saturday.
Okay.
Saturday. And so I would have expected people to have been there. But alas, there was none.
I can't vote because I don't live in Austin.
Well, okay, so what about the 2 new congressional seats we picked up? What's that going to do to us?
Well, it depends on how the Republicans redraw those districts. I'm sure they'll be,
so we kind of
around Westlake, and then they'll suddenly scoot out to West Texas, and then maybe take a run up to the Panhandle. One of those long, skinny congressional districts.
Like
the Texas legislature is infamous for that. If you look at those maps, no human being could have drawn those. Those were drawn by some weird algorithm. It's like, make an algorithm that will totally screw the Democrats. It's like, okay, we'll go over here. It's just insane.
And they do.
Well, but the real question is about the demographics in Texas changing, which could make the way that those things are drawn could be moot. If the demographics in those areas change. And there's a huge number of people moving to Austin, and Elon Musk just invited a bunch more people to move here. So Texas is liable to, it was already in the process of changing demographically. And if there's more and more change in the demographics of the state, then it's going to be harder and harder. Well, it could be harder and harder for the Republicans to ensure that they win elections, even though they're a minority. Which I'm not sure they're a minority in Texas right now, but there's many places where they really are a minority, yet they win because they've redrawn the districts.
Yeah, the metropolitan areas, definitely have trended to the left, but you go outside of there, go to Untitled County, beautiful Bastrop County. I mean, it's very crimson hued.
Yeah.
And West Texas is as red as you can get. And it's kind of that way. You look at the overall maps of where these counties trend, and there's a lot of blue around the metros, and then you get out into the rural areas and it's red all over the place.
Do any of you have a sense of, or have you read anywhere, how many of those people moving in are, libertarian? I just equate so many in tech with libertarianism, and they tend to vote with the Republicans a lot of the time because of the economic kind of stuff. Any sense of that?
Well, that's an interesting thing also about the economic part, that I feel like these people who are moving out here, who invent the tech, like Tesla and this kind of stuff, they are, and maybe this is a total misconception, but they seem to me, because they're coming from California, they don't want to pay the state tax, but it's not, they're more conscious about the environment. Does that seem fair? Okay, so if that's the case, what are we going to do about this oil production in this state? Are we going to?
Well, there's a big question about fracking, because I know, for instance, where Scoop and I came from in Big Spring, Howard County, and there's a huge deposit of oil and down there. It's called the Wolf Camp Shale, I think it is.
It's something like that. It's big.
Anyway, there's a huge deposit, but recovery of that deposit is hard, and they would have to do fracking in a big way in order to recover much of that oil. And it's an open question whether it's realistic to do fracking at the scale they would have to. So it could be that they can't get at that oil, but there's certainly, depending on the price of oil, because it has to be, the cost benefit has to be right. You have to be able to recover it and sell it for enough to get a return, right, on your investment. So it would be expensive to recover, but if oil prices go up, there are going to be people who are motivated to pound on rock to get that oil out of there.
Yeah, I agree with you. Having grown up out there, I'm going to out myself. I am a child of the oil and gas industry. My dad was a production manager for Getty Oil. So I grew up in the heart of the industry. He would drag me along to meetings in Midland of the Oil and Gas Association, hoping that this idiot son of his would would, come to his senses and decide he's going to drill for oil. And I was too busy trying to pick up the girls that were dragged along.
See, that's the difference in
their
Scoop and
father.
I. He's a son of the oil and gas industry, and I'm a son of the beer industry.
We covered all
They go
the,
together.
all the crucial industries in West Texas.
That's
Everybody
right.
else could get killed, but they were
Very
going to protect us just because we were the offspring that would keep our businesses going.
I can verify that a lot of beer is consumed in the oil field.
And both of us bailed on the industries. My dad wanted me to be an oil and gas man, and I wanted to be a DJ. DJ won out.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting too. One of the other things I wanted to talk about tonight is water. I read story after story after story. I mean, we're in a drought here. It's drier to begin with, but there's a drought here. There's a drought, believe it or not, still in parts of Texas. And then there's not, I believe there's not as much snowpack this year in a lot of areas of the Rockies. Anyway,
But we had a lot of snowpack here.
Yeah, totally. But I read a piece that New Mexico might not get a lot of water because we are beholden to send it to Texas. It's like it's our water flowing through here, but we have to. The water laws are so evil and convoluted, and the way that water rights have been taken away from people who've grown up here for generations, it's going to be interesting. And then I read that story, and you might have seen it, that California is I'm sorry, I can't even think tonight. I don't know if they're suing or they're trying to make a law that Nestle can't keep pulling water. They're pulling water out of the San Bernardino forest, and California is in such an intense drought. There's a certain kind of weed that's growing up that's like fire starter. It's going to be an interesting summer to see what happens. So anyway, why I was thinking of the water was fracking too, because you need water for the fracking. So it's going to be pretty interesting the next several years to see what happens between the climate issues, the lack of water, fracking. Oh my gosh.
Can you see the drought map that I'm sharing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at that.
I'm a little surprised at that. I didn't think it was quite so extensive.
Yeah.
I heard this summer's going to be really, really bad.
It'll probably be warm.
Well, talking about fracking, it's starting to come back. I hear from folks out in West Texas, but not very much. They're counting on the oil prices to go sky high so they can afford to, get oil and gas out of the ground again. But the big plunge in oil prices caused a huge number of abandoned oil wells all over Texas and other states as well, where the companies couldn't make any money. So they just packed up their tent, walked away, and left the well where it was. They didn't cap it. It's just there. They didn't clean up anything. And there's no, teeth in the laws that are supposed to be enforced by the Texas Railroad Commission, who does not deal with railroads at all. It's only oil and gas.
Yeah.
And
I'm pretty sure they did it on purpose. The U.S. did it on purpose, and while working with Saudi Arabia, they drove them down on purpose so that they could starve some people, like a little bit of China and a little bit of Iran.
Yeah, I would.
Is what I understood.
See that as being a reason to do that if you were a Trumper, but any sane diplomat knows that is.
No, I understand, but that's
self-defeating. But it doesn't stop a lot of people.
And that's I think. Nope, and it really was self-defeating. It really hurt everyone, and but that's that he had a good relationship with MBS and. It didn't hurt them. They've got so much money. They're paving their driveways with gold. Money means nothing to them. They're just playing the game. because it's
well,
fun.
the big game that's coming up in Europe is Putin's gas pipeline to Germany. And that's, people want to actually go to war over that. I hope not, but that's a big balance of power shifter because, Germany needs the natural gas, and Putin's more than willing to shove it their way in exchange for God knows what concessions. Yeah. And that's just part of that advancing front of Russia. They're moving in on Ukraine. They're moving in on all of the old Eastern European, former Soviet bloc, and Germany. They
may have some
get in bed with.
If you have some folks who are already maybe still sympathizers with that kind of, maybe communism, who believe that maybe socialism is also communism, which I disagree with, but I can see how it can go terribly wrong, just like anything else. But if you have, it would be easy to slide into that, especially now, I think, with all the conservative leanings of everyone all over the world. It's not just here. I mean, it's especially in Europe, I think, not good. There's a swing to the right. I know Marine Le Pen is going to run again, and she very well might win. They hate Macron. They hate him. So she could do it, and she's terrifying. She's the one who said that immigrants, what are we supposed to do? You just want these immigrants to come in and steal the wallpaper from your house?
I don't really have any wallpaper.
During
they can have all of my wallpaper, which I don't have.
Yeah, everybody was just like,
what?
And if I had wallpaper, I'd invite them to come over and take it down, because I hate that stuff.
Oh, yeah, he's a great... Yeah, exactly. Please, you can have all of it. Anyway, yeah, I just think that we're collectively also going through PTSD. We're going to have 4 years of, oh my God, I'm so relaxed and we don't have to mess with this anymore. And then we're going to find ourselves right back where we did before, where we're like, oh my God, why didn't we make the ERA a thing? Why did we just abandon that?
Yeah, we could have a big problem in the next election for sure. I'm not necessarily a Democrat, but Democrats could have a big problem in the next election. Yeah.
What do you think about third party?
Actually, I was just kind of hoping that the rapture would happen and then we'd lose a bunch of those Republican voters.
I know, it'd be awesome.
I keep going for the rapture.
No.
And it would certainly open up a lot of land here. I could probably buy a bunch of extra lots out here if they all disappeared.
You guys, God does not want those people.
We should talk. I mean, the third party thing is interesting.
Any of them.
I have been in several conversations where I talked about a potential change of party configurations. And actually, the thing that I was suggesting is that the people who were like real Republicans, traditional Republicans, because they're now alienated from their party, which has been hijacked by, the Trumpists, that they would start a party that would be, and maybe it would be those Republicans with Joe Manchin kind of Democrats, more conservative Democrats, that they would start a party that would be kind of a centrist, little bit right-leaning party, that the far right would have that Trumpist party, the QAnon party. And then on the left, there could be a very strong progressive party. And people would say, yeah, but you can only have two parties in the United States. A third party will never be competitive, and apparently it's structural. And I still don't understand why it's structural. We actually do have more than two parties right now, but only two parties are actually considered viable and actually considered having any chance to win an election. If you change the structure now, if it's structural, maybe you should consider changing the structure, i.e. like ranked voting, that kind of thing, parliamentarian system. But I don't know how we get there.
Yeah, I
And
followed the third party movements over many years, and they always seemed to be just a bit sketchy. You know, there was the Independent Party, and in various iterations, there was the whole the Green Party even was kind of strange. They were more aligned with Putin than they were with anyone over here. So it's kind of hard to get a sane third party. The ones that always popped up always had a bit of a loony glow about them.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to end up with a situation that's going to be forced on the Democrats. I think that all of those centrist Republicans that you were talking about, and the Manchin Democrats, etc.,
yeah,
that is going to be the Democratic Party. That's what they're going to call it. They're going to be Democrats. Those people have already publicly left the Republican Party, so they're not going to go back. Many of them have actually joined the Democratic Party. And so they are going to become the Democratic Party. I don't know. The Republicans may be called Republicans. They may be called Trumplicans. I don't know, but that's the hard right. It's going to be up to us to have to figure out a third party and how to make it work and how to do the marketing, because we won't have a name, a recognizable name anymore. I mean, that's the way I see this happening. I think it's just the easiest that all those guys are becoming Republicans, and Democrats. They're jumping ship from the Republican Party.
Yeah.
You see what I'm sharing now?
Yeah.
This website no longer exists, but these words that you're seeing on here are words that I wrote when I started with Are You Serious? Well, here it shows on here. Chris Novoselic, Are You Serious? Nate Wilcox and I were trying to start an open source party, and I think we had a pretty good idea for it, but it was really hard to try to get the thing off the ground, and it kind of fell apart. Once we got organized, everybody went away. It was really funny. It was an odd thing that happened. But, this idea was to use open source principles in creating this party. And you can see here transparency, the code, like C policy as being code, and to be completely open and transparent when you change it. And for the code to be accessible and modifiable, how would we do that? That's an interesting proposition there. And then inclusion, anyone can access the code and propose modifications, which is, that's the way that open source works.
Yeah.
And there's no reason not to do that with our government. But one of the problems with this is that it would be hard for people to game it to take more power than they're due, and power and money and so forth.
Maybe a thought is trying to reboot that. I think about all the projects I've worked on and that you've worked on, and it seems like every single one of them is like about 10 years ahead of the curve. So it's like, great idea, just the wrong time. However, there might be some legs on it now, because you also have to keep in mind too that more and more people beyond like a tech mindset are starting to grok the concept of open source. You remember when we were first talking about open source, and it was really hard for people to wrap their brains around the non-proprietary like software model. And then, we'd have those conversations in Caffeine and elsewhere. It's like breathlessly excited, like, imagine this. Like, there's constant iterations. You don't have to wait for the new version to cut, and so on and so forth. So it could be interesting to maybe revisit that. And because there is something, you're talking about the PTSD we're all suffering. It seems like I've had a lot of conversations about that lately. It feels like we're in this field of, it's like waiting for the next shoe to drop. as the sword of Damocles is dangling above your head, like the feeling that you can't move forward because what the hell else is going to happen, right? What, you know, but I think that, you know, part of the balm to soothe that a little bit is giving people something they can grab onto, like that feels collaborative, that feels, you know, like maybe, okay, none of it works anymore. What are some ideas that we could play with? So just tossing that out there as a thought of maybe floating this again. We'll see what happens.
I just posted a tweet and put that link in it, and to the attention of Are You Serious and Chris.
Good.
I don't really know what they're doing. I think Chris has continued to be involved in politics. He's kind of libertarian, farther to the right than Ken and I were, I think. But, you know, that's what you need. You really need to have a mix of perspectives and ideas.
Exactly. When it's not the lunatic thing, when it's not the zealots, it makes an interesting mix, because then you have insight that you wouldn't have otherwise. You know, like I find it interesting when you're talking with somebody you don't agree with, when it doesn't turn into this weird, whatever the hell it is now, where it's like insults and screaming matches, and I'm not, and I'm not going to listen to you because I only, you know, that's what makes interesting change. You have to have the diverse viewpoints. So yeah.
Well, if you wanted to make America great again, America was greatest when there was a balance of perspectives and they respected each other.
Yeah.
And this idea that it should be like the U.S. should be run by Republicans, and really the ideal way to handle the vote is to not let Democrats vote. You know, let's just have Republicans, and Republicans should run everything. I mean, that's obviously
the point of having an election.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, really, the apparent goal of the Republican Party is to have more of a dictatorship, or, you know, just one party, one set of ideas runs everything. And
now,
the U.S. was always the greatest when there was a back and forth, you know, because a single perspective is not as powerful and not as strong as a mix of perspectives.
Yeah, the big problem with any moves to have a third party was always, you know, if they were a real wacky, you know, third party, then everyone just, they're just crazy, and you would ignore them. But if they were a serious threat to the big two, then the big two suddenly get together to make sure that someone does away with this new third party, because they don't want the competition, because it's always been their game. And it's, you know, you would see a lot of pushback, not just from the Democrats, but from the Republicans as well, whenever a third party popped up that looked like it might catch hold.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you see what happened here was that you have these far right guys who kind of had their own thing. It was John Birch Society, and everybody thought they were crazy, and they figured it out. They figured out that they could hijack the Republican Party, and that they could take power that way, and they managed to do it. Just like, you know, there's some reason to believe that the Russians realized that the way to defeat the U.S. is not to, you know, go to some kind of war, but to just burrow in and kind of embed your people and people who, you know, will be somewhat beholden to you, and take over that way. And that's kind of what we see happening here. And I don't think it's just happening in the U.S. And the real question is, how much will people put up with? Because most people are not aligned with those guys. And eventually people are going to stand up. I think about, when are we going to start seeing blacks with guns?
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know.
Oh, there's a whole movement right now, actually.
I know. And you can't blame them, you know. I mean, how
I would be carrying everywhere. I mean, I
well,
don't know. I can say that, but I mean, it's like, you know, if it's your constitutional right, then I think that they should be all carrying and being in. I would not walk down the street alone carrying one if
I
I
mean,
were
how many
black.
times do you have to see a video of some person getting shot
Okay,
and
but
killed because of their race before, if you're a member of that race, you start to think, wow, we gotta defend ourselves, you know. And that's why
so
I keep thinking that pretty soon we're going to see, I mean, you see all these like Proud Boy type guys carrying their guns around and, you know, being a kind of militia.
I
I
think
think
because
that's
it's
going to happen.
terrifying.
I think it'll happen with
I
blacks
think
too. And
because
then
it's
we,
absolutely, I don't
yeah,
know.
I
I
agree. It
don't,
moves us closer to, I mean, we have kind of a civil war going on, but it's a cold war. But
Yeah.
it can move to a hot war eventually, and that's the kind of thing that would take us there. And how can you? I mean, how can you blame people for wanting to defend themselves? You know, but
well, so what
then,
happens if they shoot a cop at a traffic stop? I mean, what happens then?
well, I mean, what happens then, or what can happen, and there's various contexts you could imagine where basically things just explode. You know, uh,
What as you're talking, John? What's it floating through my mind? Movie screen is the occupation of Wounded Knee, and then the pushback that happened, like when the Native Americans said, like, okay, screw this, we're not taking it anymore, and they're armed, and it's like, okay, we're gonna send in tanks and we're gonna send in all this other shit. I think.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember watching the Black Panthers show up armed in Oakland back in the day, and that certainly got a lot of attention, and
Oh yeah.
everyone took a step back.
I saw a very interesting film at South by Southwest this year. This one, Executive Order, and basically it posits a situation where in Brazil, this is like was filmed in Brazil, and apparently there's a lot of racial tension in Brazil now. And in this film, in the near future, the Brazilian government issues an order that they don't refer to people as blacks anymore. They refer to them as high melanin. And they issue an order that all high melanin people will be deported to Africa because they're like descendants of African slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows how, you know, basically all hell breaks loose. Wow. And that's, you know, I mean, sooner or later,
because people they're fighting to stay here. Is that that's what's happening?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, that's kind of hopefully that's an absurd idea that you would try to deport, but I don't know. I mean, there were citizens being deported during the Trump administration. It was rare.
There are a lot of those people that are all in favor of that. And I've heard them chanting, you know, go back where you came from, go back to your own country. It doesn't matter, you know, who the person is, you know, if they're not white and blonde, they're urged to go back where
they couldn't possibly be from Indiana.
But, you know, kind of what I'm saying here is that the politicians at the extremes, especially, and the media, because of how it works for them, it's like they're taking huge stores of gasoline and pouring them everywhere they can and looking for a match, you know?
Yeah. Any excuse to like clamp down. And yeah, and I'm glad you said that thing about the Cold War, because I had that thought in the shower 2 days ago, like, oh, that's where the Cold War went.
Was it a hot shower or a cold shower? Oh, wow, we've got Susie here twice.
Wow, double. Wow.
I wondered about that.
It's like recursion or something. It's awesome.
It's the double bent twins.
There we go.
That was weird.
It was unusual.
Well, I think, you know, I really want to go back to my own political party. You know, I have my own political party that I was, you know, active in back in the day.
Yeah.
And I found it to be very enlightening. Well, maybe not.
I've been thinking a lot about, well, you know, thinking a lot about what you said about the authoritarianism. And I remember my dad, you know, who was very Republican, very, very high up in the Pentagon, you know, he couldn't speak highly enough of Singapore because you know, he liked the idea that if you put your, you know, you spit your gum on the sidewalk, you'd be caned. To him, that was like how you run a country.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's not alone.
Yeah.
He wasn't alone in his thinking, because that's how a lot of these people think. You know, it's about, you know, the control, and I just never, it just blew my mind that that I mean, it makes sense, but this whole idea about, like, you know,
well, in Korea, think about North Korea. So I've been watching a lot of, there's this woman who does a show. She's actually a defector, and she's written books, and she talks about what the real pleasure squad is and what the fake grocery stores that people see are, and how Pyongyang is the richest country, probably, you know, they were told the richest country in the world, and all of this kind of stuff. And it's and then you see the reality of it, you know, because people go in there and film undercover, and you're just like, oh my God, what? And she gives these commentaries about how these are the middle class. This is the middle class, and they all live in one house, and they have chickens and a garden. And that's what makes them middle class, is that they're able to grow their own food. It's just, wow. Why? Mm-hmm. What is the point of that?
It's making me think about a quote I heard from Chairman Mao, where he had told somebody about governing, and says, you keep their minds empty and their bellies full, and everything will be okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, some people believe that way. And if you want to keep people's minds empty, you kind of muck with their education, and you lure them into like stupid conspiracy theory mongering organizations. And then you make sure that they're still well fed, keep the groceries stocked.
Yeah, give them just enough. Like, you can't, like, yeah, because I remember that's another thing my dad talked about a lot. You know, it's like the whole idea of like keeping people, don't give them too much. You know, it's because they, you know, keep feeding the Puritan work ethic, you know, and the up by your bootstraps ethic. Give them enough so they can get, you know, maybe get a little home and a car, and, you know, even if they have to work 3 or 4 jobs, you know, and make sure that they feel like they're part of a tribe.
Let them keep their hamburgers.
Yeah, that's right.
Otherwise we are exercising the soft bigotry of low expectations. Isn't that what W called that?
Yeah. You know, and
who was his speechwriter? Jesus.
Yeah. And if you keep, you know, with that working 3 jobs, you know, and they're not relying on any part of any kind of assistance or whatever. We work for our living, and blah, blah, and make them so they're part of the club that, you know, like, is against anybody sucking off the teat of the system. And then, but with those 3 jobs they have to work, they're too exhausted to even think. So giving them something to think about. I mean, it's also hideously, obviously programmed. It's painful.
Yeah, but then you get to ease your mind with alcohol and chicken McNuggets, which is basically all you can afford or have time for.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you want to start a revolution, go to a McDonald's when they run out of a McRib and they're having the McRib sandwich. You know, you're 2 McRibs away from revolution if they run out. And I've actually seen that happen and ran for my life.
Wow.
Oh my
Yeah.
And it's a horrible sandwich. If you, it's a sandwich for people who have never had a rib. It's like, you might as well call it, the Mac Turkey Burger, anything, because it has nothing to do with ribs.
The Mac phone.
No, it's just rib shaped meat, right? Or meat product. It's just
meat
it's
product.
shape
Yeah.
of a but is it
Like
like a
potted
shape
meat
of
food product.
rack of ribs? Like a tiny baby rack of ribs?
It's made out of Soylent Green.
Yes.
Ah,
Well, there's a really good book that I've been reading by Jonathan Haidt, that's called, what the heck is it called? Did I mention this one before? The Righteous Mind: Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion. Our friend Owen McNally recommended I read it because, when you can't understand why, when you're trying to make sense of something like the MAGA people or whatever, or why, and he goes into this whole biological thing about, I'm still trying to sort through it, but like you might have a selfish gene where you're looking out for yourself. However, you band with others who share similar interests to protect those interests. And he gave an image in the book of the Macedonian flanks, when they'd attack, they'd be in that square and they'd have the spears out and all that. And they would work as one unit to protect the resources. It's really fascinating. And it's like, oh my God, that makes sense. And he talked about military training, like where you're stripped down, and then you're rebuilt back up. And part of the reasoning behind marching and drilling with other people is to create that sort of tribal bond, so it's a working machine to protect a certain thing. And I was like, yeah, that makes total sense. And why you hear a lot of guys who have gone through combat together, that they reminisce often about the best time they ever had in their lives was that camaraderie with the other troops they served with, because they become this, like, it's like one unit. And so it's like there's even more nuance to it, but it's like explaining a lot to me. It makes a lot of sense to me. It's that need, that need to belong. Nobody wants to be cold from the tribe. It's a lonely place to be cold from the tribe. So, if you think about a lot of those folks, this brings forward some compassion in me when I think about, a lot of MAGA people, like, screaming for this, that, and the other thing in justice. It's like the feeling of, they feel that Trump sees them. He doesn't, but they feel he does. Right. And so
he's just a reflection. Yeah.
But that, I feel for people like that, feel like they don't belong to anything, and so on and so forth. So I'm not excusing any of it, but I'm just saying I could understand why, if you're sitting there in your house alone, just watching your reality TV shows, and you're lonely and scared, and the world's changing and there's nobody to talk you through it. If somebody's saying, hey, we're here to fight for you, we'll fight together, I can kind of understand that. There's a lot of freaking lonely people in the world. There's
I'd like to throw out a conspiracy theory in our last 5 minutes that we haven't touched. It's going to be another gas shortage this summer. That was the big news, because they can't, it's not that they're short on gas, they're short on truck drivers. All the truck drivers lost their jobs and moved on, and they're now, I think 30% of the truck drivers are gone, and they can't replace them. Can you imagine how people, you want to start a revolution, tell people they can't fill up their Hummer, and there'll be riots in the streets.
Oh my God.
Remember the 1970s when they had the real gas crisis, when there was no gas. I lived near a service station, and I went out and made extra money selling soft drinks to the people lined up for gas.
That's awesome. I remember that. I remember when that happened. Wow.
I remember that too.
Yeah.
It was not good. It was not at all good. And that's back when they had people who would fill it up for you. Remember that? Remember those guys?
Yeah.
Fill her up, and they'd wipe your window off.
I remember my mom had her golf card. Remember golf? You know, and you could use your golf card at Holiday Inns. I remember that.
Oh yeah. I used to have a golf card.
A hell of a card. Yeah. Good card.
Well,
good card.
Are y'all having there's a crisis in New Mexico too, that a lot of business owners are you'll go up to a store, like a little like a restaurant or whatever, and a lot of them are saying, we can't help you right now, or forgive our slowness, because we can't find people to hire. A lot of people are like, I was paid the same, pretty much the same I made at my shitty job by getting unemployment during COVID. And I had the time to reflect on how shitty I was treated in my job. So I don't want to go back. And so a lot of people are saying, these lazy people, welfare, it's like, can you blame them? I mean,
yeah.
Why don't you have a look at what you're paying these people for? I mean, maybe that would have some.
A lot of people got an object lesson in, choosing the right to careers. It's like, this is what happened to you before. Do you really want to go back to that, or do you want to move up to something, anything different?
I will say that Austin doesn't seem to be having that problem, at least.
Yeah, it's a big problem.
Well,
here. Yeah, it's a
aren't
big
they
problem.
taking it up, and aren't the courts looking at the right to work right now? The feds are looking at the right to work. There's a some case they're about to take up about whether or not they can force us to or not allow us to join a union.
Yeah,
so
that's been a movement for a long time, of a big Republican talking point.
Right. And so they're talking about it on the Supreme Court level right now. So it's kind of interesting. I don't know though. I mean, do you want are you required to be in a union if you're a unionized state? Do you have to join the union?
Well, I don't know. I think unions you are. If there isn't a legislation that says you have that right to, there are right to work states where they passed the law that you don't have to join. But,
yeah, I was actually approached by a union when I worked for the state here in Texas, and they were having trouble getting people to sign up because you didn't really have to be a member, and they have to kind of convince you that they're going to do more for you than there's also a Public Employees Association, which was kind of an authorized thing, but it didn't have it was less potentially adversarial with the employer, which is the state. Anyway,
right. And they made it harder for the Texas and state union too. It used to be where they would just take it out of your check, and then they stopped allowing that, and you had to make a special provision for that. I mean, they really are trying to hamstring it too. So,
I mean, unions are not much of a thing now, really. And there's a lot of opposition to unions, and the whole gig worker thing too is like the idea in the US, the middle class idea that you would get a job and your job would take care of you.
Yeah.
You would have a job and you go to work every day and you'd have insurance and all. That's like fading fast.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. And so are we, as a matter of fact.
Yes, we're in our final minute.
Yeah.
Anyone needs to kick a field goal, you better do it now.
Well, I was just going to say, if you can see the Rock Poster Society, go to trips.org to sign up. They're having a really cool webinar that I'm going to be running the Zoom and the live for. they're interviewing 3 artists, poster art artists, and
Wow.
really cool organization that gives money to artists to help them do what they do. This Sunday, May 2nd, 11 a.m. Pacific time. So
I'm not getting trips.org to load.
Okay.
It says,
I've written it down.
what is it? TRIPS?
no, trps.org. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Joe Ray
TRPS.
set out a nice invite on the event that I'm going to check it out.
Right on. Yeah.
Save me a seat.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
really great book. So yeah.
Well, I just want to show everybody this is what it looks like.
Ta-da! Yeah, and I want to
Wow.
have some of the board members on one of our shows in the near future. So,
Oh, yeah, that would be
Yeah,
great.
definitely. Those are our kind of
Awesome.
people.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
they are.
Perfect. Pluralist
go.
utopias indeed. Okay, well, the time has come, the walrus said, to leave.
Jabberwocky.
Okay.
Jabberwocky.
Next week we have Joe Ray Domeno, music publicist extraordinaire. So
And I will be absent, unfortunately.
he'll be on the beach.
Yeah,
Oh.
well, we'll be having
Actually, I'll
fun
be
with that.
sitting in Cory Doctorow's backyard
Oh, all right. That's
at
okay.
the time. All right. Well, off we go.
Later.
Bye.
Bye, all.
You can follow the Plutopia News Network at plutopia.io. On Facebook, go to @Plutopia News. On Twitter, it's @Plutopia. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.